The silence in the command center was deafening. Across the galaxy, all eyes were fixed on the latest broadcast from the Galactic Council. On the holoscreen before them, the image of Ryak, the ruthless leader of the Council, appeared. His dark, cold eyes were fixed directly on the viewers, and his voice, deep and commanding, resonated with authority. "This is the final warning." Ryak's voice echoed, causing a chill to run down the spines of anyone who heard it. "Humanity has had its chance. You will surrender to the Galactic Council immediately, or face complete annihilation. There is no more room for negotiation. You are either with us, or you will be destroyed." The message was clear. Ryak's words left no space for doubt. The Council, the powerful governing body of the galaxy, had made its decision. Humanity would either submit to their rule or be wiped from existence. The consequences of defiance were severe, but there was no turning back for the Council now. They had sent their ultimatum, and they expected it to be obeyed. The camera zoomed in on the Earth's response. In the command centers scattered across the planet, there was an overwhelming sense of unease. The Galactic Council was the most powerful empire in the galaxy, controlling dozens of star systems, their fleet of warships unmatched by any other force. Humans had always been small in comparison to the other species of the galaxy, yet they had begun to make a name for themselves. But no one expected that they could stand up to the mighty Council. Admiral Annabelle Wells stood at the center of the Earth's command room, her face unreadable as she watched the broadcast. Around her, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Officers whispered among themselves, unsure of how to proceed. Some believed that there was no way out, that humanity could not survive against the might of the Galactic Council. Others weren't so sure. The Council had underestimated humanity before. Maybe they would make the same mistake again. Annabelle crossed her arms, watching as Ryak's cold gaze flickered across the screen. The ultimatum was terrifying, but there was something in her gut that told her that the Council had made a grave mistake. The humans weren't the weaklings they thought they were. "We have to make a decision," one of her senior officers, Lieutenant Jameson, said quietly, his voice tight with anxiety. "If we don't surrender, it's over. We're outnumbered, outgunned. There's no chance we can win this." Annabelle's lips tightened, her eyes never leaving the screen. "We're not surrendering," she said firmly, her voice steady and resolute. "I don't care how many ships they have or how many planets they control. Humanity will not bow to them. We'll fight." "But how?" Jameson asked, his voice breaking. "How can we possibly stand against the entire Galactic Council? What do we have that can defeat them?" Annabelle turned to face him, her eyes sharp with determination. "We have something they don't. We have our will. They think we're weak. They think we'll fold under pressure. But they don't understand us. They never have." Across the room, others were beginning to voice their agreement. The Council had underestimated humanity time and time again. For years, humans had been fighting, surviving, and building. They weren't going to give up now, not when the future of their species was at stake. "We have been preparing for this moment," Annabelle continued. "We've been building, training, and learning. We have the technology. We have the tactics. And most importantly, we have the strength to fight. We will strike back." As Annabelle spoke, there was a shift in the room. The officers, once uncertain, now looked at her with renewed hope. A plan was beginning to form, and with it came a sense of purpose. This was no longer just a matter of survival. It was a matter of proving that humanity would not be erased, not without a fight. Ryak's voice continued to reverberate through the room, sending shockwaves of fear across the globe. "You have 48 hours to comply. Any attempt to resist will be met with total annihilation." Annabelle stood tall, her expression unflinching. "We will make them regret ever threatening us," she muttered under her breath. As the broadcast ended, she turned back to her team, her mind already racing with plans. She had never believed in the stories of humanity's greatness. They were always too dramatic, too exaggerated. But now she could see the truth in those stories. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something greater, something worth every sacrifice. She could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on her, but she also felt something else. A fire. A fire in her heart that told her this was not the end, but the beginning. This was their time. Humanity would strike back, and the galaxy would never be the same again. As the broadcast ended, the silence in the command room was replaced with an urgency that couldn't be ignored. It wasn't just a message, it was a call to arms. The fate of humanity now rested on the shoulders of those who would fight. They were no longer just a small, insignificant species in the eyes of the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they would make sure the Galactic Council knew it. With the clock ticking down, the world held its breath. Humanity was no longer going to wait for destruction to come knocking on their door. It was time for them to take action. And in the quiet of the command room, in the faces of the men and women who had always fought for survival, the first embers of rebellion were beginning to burn. Humanity's response to the Galactic Council's ultimatum was swift and precise, but it was not born of desperation. No, it was born of something deeper, an unwavering resolve. While the Galactic Council thought they had cornered Earth, they had grossly underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, survive, and strike back. As the Council's ultimatum echoed across every broadcast system, Earth's leaders gathered in their war rooms, making final preparations for the inevitable. There were no grand speeches, no declarations of heroism, just a quiet, burning determination. Admiral Annabel Wells stood at the center of the chaos, her face a picture of calm focus amidst the frantic atmosphere. Earth's military was vast, but facing the might of the Galactic Council was no small feat. The Council's fleet was almost twice the size of humanity's, their weapons far more advanced. Yet there was one thing the Council had not counted on: humanity's ingenuity. Over the years, Earth's scientists and engineers had been working in secret, developing technology that could level the playing field. New stealth ships, cloaked weapons systems, and a fleet of eye-controlled drones that could hit with pinpoint accuracy. Humanity was ready, but they couldn't reveal their strength just yet. In the command center, the officers were tense, but their voices began to carry the weight of resolve. They had lived through too many years of fear, too many years of uncertainty, to let it end like this. "We may be outnumbered," said Lieutenant Jameson, looking at the data on the screens before him. "But we've been preparing for this moment since the Council first set its sights on us. We've learned, adapted, and we've got the technology to turn the tables." Admiral Wells' gaze never wavered from the holographic map of the galaxy displayed in front of her. "We've waited long enough," she said quietly, though her voice carried a strength that reverberated throughout the room. "This isn't just about survival. It's about showing the galaxy that humanity won't be ruled by anyone. Not by the Galactic Council, and not by any other force." She turned, looking directly at Jameson. "Prepare the fleet. We move tonight." As the officers scrambled to carry out her orders, Annabel stood still, her mind focused on the mission ahead. The Council might have all the resources in the galaxy, but humanity had something else. Determination, a willingness to fight when all hope seemed lost, and most importantly, a collective will that couldn't be crushed. They weren't going to surrender. Not now. Not ever. The first strike would be crucial. Humanity's forces needed to cripple the Council's communication lines and disrupt their military coordination. If the Council couldn't communicate, they couldn't plan. If they couldn't plan, they couldn't retaliate effectively. In the dark of space, humanity would strike with surgical precision, using their newly developed stealth technology to breach the Council's defenses. They had learned from their mistakes, studied their enemies' weaknesses, and now they would hit hard and fast. As Annabel moved toward the command chair, she couldn't shake the memory of the first time humanity had been threatened. A smaller, weaker species in the eyes of the galaxy, they had faced overwhelming odds before. Each time, they had come out victorious, not because they were the strongest, but because they never gave up. That was what made them unique. The galaxy might see them as fragile, insignificant, but they had proven time and again that humans would never be cowed into submission. She glanced at the clock on the wall. Time was running out. The Council had given humanity 48 hours to comply. There was no time for hesitation, no room for error. The attack would begin soon, and once it did, there would be no going back. Annabelle's resolve strengthened. She didn't need to be the hero. She just needed to lead humanity in the fight of their lives, and that was exactly what she was going to do. The officers were now seated, ready for the final orders. "It's time," she said, her voice a low but steady command. "We don't just respond to the Council's ultimatum. We make them regret ever thinking they could rule us." The hum of anticipation filled the room as the command center came to life. All around Earth, humanity was readying itself for the greatest battle in its history. The first wave of strikes would soon be launched, and the Galactic Council would be left reeling, unsure of what had just hit them. But Annabelle knew one thing for certain. Humanity was no longer a victim in the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the Galactic Council was about to learn that lesson the hard way. In the quiet moments before the storm, a deep and powerful feeling swept over Annabelle. She wasn't fighting alone. Humanity was united, and together, they would make history. The time for fear had passed. The time for action had arrived. The attack began with silence. For the Galactic Council, it was the calm before the storm, an eerie quiet, as though the galaxy itself was holding its breath. The Council, confident in their superior military might, had underestimated humanity's resolve and cunning. They believed their ships and technology were invincible, that no one, least of all a small rebellious species like humans, could ever challenge their dominance. But humanity had learned their lessons the hard way, and now they were about to strike with precision and power unlike anything the Council had expected. Admiral Annabelle Wells watched the holographic display in the Earth Command Center, her gaze steady, unwavering. The clock was ticking down, and humanity's response was already in motion. The first wave of stealth ships, specially designed to evade detection by the Council's vast fleet, had left Earth's atmosphere. These ships were equipped with cloaking technology so advanced that not even the most sophisticated sensors the Council possessed could pick them up. The fleet moved in total silence, shadows slipping through the darkness of space, ready to strike. The first target was the Council's communication array, located on a distant moon. The array was the heart of the Council's command, the lifeblood of their vast empire. If humanity could cripple it, they would gain a vital advantage. The stealth ships moved quickly and quietly, their engines whispering through the void of space. There were no explosions, no immediate signs of conflict, just the sudden, unexpected shock as the Council's communication grid was disrupted. Back at the Council's capital, Ryak, the Council's leader, received an urgent transmission. His eyes narrowed as he watched the readout. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice a cold growl. "How could our systems be compromised? We have the best defenses in the galaxy." His advisors were scrambling, their faces pale with confusion. "Sir, we are under attack, but the ships, there are no signatures. We can't track them. They're too fast, too silent." Ryak slammed his fist on the table, his anger radiating through the room. "Impossible. This cannot be happening. Humanity is not capable of this." But despite his disbelief, Ryak knew the truth. Humanity had been planning for this moment. They had prepared in ways the Council could never have anticipated. While the Council had been busy expanding their empire, dominating world after world, humanity had been learning, adapting, and evolving. And now, their preparation was paying off. The attack was swift, almost surgical, and the Council had no idea how to respond. Back on Earth, Annabelle's team watched as the first wave of ships reported success. The communication array had been destroyed, and the Council's command structure was in chaos. The Galactic Council had no way to coordinate their forces. It was the perfect opening. But Annabelle knew this was only the beginning. The Council would retaliate, of course. They always did. But humanity had one advantage. They were no longer fighting defensively. The attack had begun, and now they would take the fight to the Council's doorstep. As the first wave returned to Earth, a sense of cautious optimism spread through the command center. They had done it. The impossible had been achieved. But Annabelle's mind was already focused on the next move. The Council would be organizing a response soon. They wouldn't remain disoriented for long. Humanity had to keep the pressure on, disrupt their operations even further. The second wave of ships, larger and more heavily armed, began to assemble. These ships would hit the Council's shipyards, their very lifeblood. Without these shipyards, the Council's ability to produce warships and replenish their fleet would be severely crippled. It was a bold move, but it had to be done. Annabelle turned to her second-in-command, Commander Harper. "Prepare the next wave. We're hitting them where it hurts." Harper nodded without a word, his face grim but resolute. They knew the stakes were high, but they also knew what they had to do. Earth's ships were ready, and the next phase of the operation was already in motion. Humanity was no longer on the defensive. They were on the attack, and they were going to keep pressing until the Council had no choice but to surrender. Meanwhile, Ryak was pacing in his private chambers, his anger growing with each passing minute. "This isn't over," he muttered to himself. "Humanity will pay for this. They will learn that no one defies the Galactic Council and lives to tell the tale." But deep down, even Ryak could feel it. A growing sense of uncertainty. This wasn't the typical rebellion. This wasn't some weak, outmatched species fighting against the odds. Humanity was different. They were organized, resourceful, and relentless. And as the second wave of attacks began, Ryak's worst fears started to take shape. This wouldn't be a simple battle. This was going to be a war, and humanity had just opened the first chapter. In Earth's command center, Annabelle stood before the holographic display once more, her mind racing with plans. The first strike had worked perfectly, but the real test was yet to come. The Council was about to respond, and humanity had to be ready. This was no longer about surviving. It was about winning, and for the first time in history, humanity had the upper hand. As the second wave of ships moved into position, Annabelle gave a single command: execute. The ships launched, their engines roaring to life as they sped through the stars. The battle for the galaxy had truly begun, and the Galactic Council had no idea what was coming for them. The Galactic Council had long considered themselves the unchallenged rulers of the galaxy. Their fleet was vast, their reach immense, and their influence absolute. For centuries, they had crushed rebellions, subdued civilizations, and imposed their will on countless species. Never had they met a challenge they couldn't quell. But humanity was proving to be different. The first wave of attacks had thrown the Council into disarray. But that was just the beginning. Annabelle Wells knew it. Her officers knew it. The Galactic Council was already mobilizing their forces, desperate to retaliate against what they had once considered a mere nuisance. They would not forgive this insult, not without a fight. But humanity wasn't done yet. Their strikes had been swift and effective. And now, the true battle was about to unfold. The Council's fleet was regrouping, sending out a vast armada to reassert control. Their ships were massive, armored, and brimming with firepower, but humanity had learned long ago how to fight smarter, not just harder. The Council's strengths were their size and strength, but humanity's strength lay in adaptability and cunning. Earth's fleet wasn't the largest, nor the most heavily armed, but it was precise and ruthless. It was a force that could strike quickly, hit hard, and then disappear into the shadows before the Council even knew what had happened. In the Earth Command Center, Annabelle stood before a table covered with holographic maps of the galaxy. Each map was a potential target, each one representing a weak point in the Council's defenses. The next strike had to be decisive. The time for small, surgical attacks was over. Humanity needed to hit the Council where it would hurt most. The Council's warships were formidable, but their production lines were their greatest vulnerability. If humanity could cripple those shipyards, they would halt the Council's war effort in its tracks. Admiral Wells' gaze was fixed on the map of the Council's homeworld, a planet surrounded by a series of heavily fortified shipyards and defense platforms. It was a long shot, but it was their best option. If they could take out the shipyards, the Council would be forced to retreat, unable to replenish their fleet fast enough to counterattack. It was risky. The defenses surrounding the homeworld were unlike anything humanity had faced before, but Annabelle had never been one to shy away from a challenge. "We've analyzed their defenses," Annabelle said, her voice steady and calm as she addressed her officers. "The Council's homeworld is heavily protected, but we have an opening, a weak spot in their outer defense grid. We strike fast, hit the shipyards, and get out before they can respond." Lieutenant Jameson, who had been a part of the first wave, stepped forward. His face was grim but determined. "It's going to be tough. Their fleet is already assembling, and they'll have reinforcements moving into position. We won't have much time." "We don't need much time," Annabelle replied. "We'll be in and out before they even know what happened. But we need to act now." The room fell silent as everyone processed the magnitude of what Annabelle was proposing. Striking the Council's homeworld was a risky move, but if they succeeded, it could break the back of the Council's war machine. There was no turning back. The officers nodded in agreement, and within moments, the command center was alive with activity as the final preparations were made. Humanity was no longer running from the Council. They were on the offensive, and they were going to make every moment count. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Ryak's frustration was growing. His spies had reported the damage to the communication network, but the real blow had come when his fleet had been ambushed. His eyes burned with rage as he stared out at the vast expanse of space from his command ship, the flagship Dominion. "Where are they? Where is humanity?" he growled, pacing back and forth on the bridge. "We've lost contact with half of our patrols. Our warships are being picked off one by ships we can't even identify. How are they doing this?" His most trusted advisor, Commander Thrax, spoke up. "It's not the size of their fleet that's the problem, Ryak. It's their tactics. They know our weaknesses, and they're exploiting them. They've taken out our communication network, and now they're targeting our most vulnerable shipyards. We can't let this go on any longer." Ryak's hands tightened into fists. "Then we'll take the fight to them. Call in reinforcements from the outer systems, mobilize the full fleet, and send a message to our allies. This ends now." The stakes had risen. What had started as a simple show of force by the Galactic Council had turned into a war, and the Council's pride was on the line. They would stop at nothing to crush this rebellion. But humanity had no intention of backing down. They had seen what the Council was capable of, and they were prepared to face it head-on. The clock was ticking. Earth's fleet was already en route to the heart of the Council's empire. The battle for the future of the galaxy was about to reach its climax, and no one, neither the Council nor humanity, knew what the outcome would be. As the Earth ships prepared to jump into hyperspace, Annabelle's face remained calm, but her mind was racing. They had come so far, but the real test was yet to come. The fate of the galaxy rested on this next move. If they failed, the Council would retaliate with unimaginable force. But if they succeeded, humanity would have a fighting chance, maybe even the power to reshape the galaxy in their own image. "Prepare the fleet," Annabelle said softly, her voice carrying a weight that made everyone in the room stop and listen. "We're going to finish this." And with that, humanity's greatest battle began, against the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known. The Council's hold on the galaxy was slipping, and now it was humanity's time to strike back. The storm was coming, and it would not stop until the Council had been brought to its knees. The first strike on the Council's homeworld had been a resounding success. The targeted shipyards had taken heavy damage, but the job wasn't done yet. The Galactic Council's response was swift, furious and unforgiving. Annabelle Wells knew that humanity had only gained a brief advantage. Now, the real battle for survival would begin. The Council's reinforcements were already en route, and they would be coming in full force. Earth's forces couldn't afford to rest, couldn't afford to hesitate. They had to keep pushing, keep the pressure on. The fleet was already repositioning, setting course for the Council's inner sanctum, the heart of their power. The Council had never expected a species like humanity to be this bold. They had underestimated them, thinking they would buckle under the weight of the Council's might. But humanity had learned to thrive under pressure, and now they were delivering the hardest blows the galaxy had ever seen. Inside Earth's command center, Admiral Annabelle Wells stood at the front of the room, staring down at the updated battle maps. A series of holographic projections floated in the air, showing the movements of the Council's fleet. The path to victory was becoming clearer, but it was still fraught with peril. The Council was regrouping, preparing a counteroffensive, and they were bringing their most powerful warships to bear. They were angry, desperate, and that made them dangerous. But humanity was ready. The new battle strategy had already been set in motion. They would strike at the heart of the Council's fleet, destroy their command ships, their leadership, and force them into disarray. It was a gamble, but it was the only option. If the Council lost their leaders, their empire would begin to crumble. The shockwaves would be felt across the galaxy, and humanity would have a chance to break free from their oppressive rule. "Get the fleet ready," Annabelle said, her voice commanding and firm. "We move at dawn." She turned to her second-in-command, Commander Harper, who was studying the latest intelligence report. "Are we ready for this?" Harper looked up, his face grim. "We're prepared, but we're outnumbered. The Council's fleet is nearly 4 times the size of ours. It's going to be an uphill battle." "I'm aware," Annabelle said, "but we don't have a choice. We can't give them a chance to recover. We hit hard, and we hit now." Across the room, the officers and crew members worked tirelessly, making the final preparations for the assault. Ships were being outfitted with upgraded weaponry, stealth systems, and enhanced armor. This was the critical moment, humanity's final chance to strike a blow that would reshape the galaxy. If they failed, the Council would wipe them out with a crushing counterattack. But if they succeeded, the galaxy would never be the same. The fleet assembled, ready for the assault on the heart of the Council's power. As Annabelle and her team surveyed the final preparations, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Humanity had risen from the ashes of countless setbacks, surviving the worst the galaxy could throw at them. Now, they were poised to change the balance of power forever. As the countdown began, Annabelle turned to Commander Harper. "We've come a long way. Let's make sure this counts." The ships launched into space, moving silently as shadows between the stars. The next few hours would determine the future of humanity and the galaxy. Their mission was simple: penetrate the heart of the Council's defenses, take out their command ships, and disrupt their ability to retaliate. The first wave of humanity's fleet slipped through the cracks in the Council's outer defense grid. Stealth technology kept their ships undetected as they approached their targets, taking down smaller ships and disabling key communication relays. The battle was intense, but there was no turning back. Earth's forces were pushing forward with relentless determination. No one was backing down now. Annabelle's fingers were tight on the console as she watched the live feed from the front line. Each ship that returned with information brought her closer to the final confrontation. The battle had started, but the next phase would be the hardest. The heart of the Council's fleet was still untouched, and there was still a long road ahead. As Earth's ships moved deeper into the heart of the Council's space, it became clear that humanity had underestimated one thing: the Council's ability to regroup. The first wave had hit hard, but the second wave, the one meant to cripple their leadership, was going to be more difficult than expected. "We've encountered heavier resistance," Lieutenant Jameson reported. "They'd brought in reinforcements. We've lost 2 ships already." Annabelle's face tightened, but she kept her voice steady. Stay on course. We can't turn back now. Humanity's fleet pushed forward, taking heavy losses, but the will to win was stronger than ever. The strategy had worked so far, now they just needed to reach the Council's flagship and take down its command center. The enemy flagship, the Imperium, was a monstrous ship, the pride of the Council's fleet. It sat in the center of their formation, surrounded by dozens of smaller ships. Its shields were impenetrable, and its firepower was enough to level entire cities. But for all its might, it was vulnerable to surprise. The first human strike force had already breached their outer defenses. Now, Annabelle's fleet was closing in. The tension in the command center was palpable. The fate of the galaxy was hanging on a knife's edge, and one wrong move could spell disaster. Focus on the flagship, Annabelle ordered. We've got one shot at this. We need to disable their command center. As the ships closed in, their cloaking technology kicked in, hiding them from the Council's sensors. This was the final push, the most dangerous part of the mission. Every ship in the fleet knew what was at stake. In the darkness of space, the battle raged on. Humanity's forces were fighting with everything they had, but the Council was relentless. Still, Annabelle knew there was no going back now. This was the moment that would define them. This was humanity's last chance. The attack on the Imperium had begun, and whether they succeeded or failed, humanity would never be the same again. The storm that had been brewing for so long had finally arrived, and it would leave a mark on the galaxy that could never be erased. The battle for the Imperium was reaching its fever pitch. Humanity's ships, battered and bruised, had fought their way deep into the heart of the Council's defense grid. The Council, though mighty, was beginning to show cracks. Their leadership was scrambling, unsure of how to counter the unexpected ferocity of humanity's assault. Annabelle Wells knew the stakes had never been higher. The fate of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy, rested on the next few minutes. The Imperium loomed ahead, a behemoth of a ship nearly twice the size of any vessel in Earth's fleet. Its outer hull was lined with layered shields, crackling with defensive energy. Behind its massive form, smaller warships swarmed, forming an impenetrable wall of defense. Humanity's forces, though smaller in number, had a clear advantage in tactics. Stealth, speed, and precision were their weapons. Annabelle's flagship, the Independence, had slipped through the cracks of the enemy's defenses, using the lessons learned from earlier battles. The first wave had softened up the enemy, drawing their fire and weakening their defenses. Now, with the Imperium in sight, the real challenge had begun. Time was running out. The Council's counterattacks would come soon, and if they didn't disable the flagship's command center in the next few minutes, humanity's last chance would be lost. Status report. Annabelle barked over the comms, her voice steady but tense. Shields holding at 40%, Captain, Lieutenant Jameson replied. We've sustained heavy fire from their smaller ships, but we're in position. The Imperium's command center is just ahead. We've identified the weak point. Good, Annabelle said, her mind racing through the battle strategies. We hit that point, and we hit it hard. This is our moment, team. If we take down their leadership, their entire fleet will collapse. The Independence's engines roared as it surged forward, cutting through the darkness of space like a blade through air. The smaller ships in humanity's fleet followed closely, maintaining their formation, their weapons primed. Annabelle's gaze remained fixed on the holographic display, tracking the movements of the Imperium and its surrounding defenses. The tension was palpable in the command center. Every crew member was on edge, aware that one wrong move could be catastrophic. As the fleet approached the Imperium, the first wave of Council reinforcements arrived. They were massive warships, much larger than the first ships humanity had encountered. Their firepower was overwhelming, and for a brief moment, Annabelle feared they might be outgunned. But then, the Independence made its move. Deploy the EMP missiles, Annabelle ordered. A dozen sleek missiles shot from the underside of the Independence, streaking through space and slamming into the defensive grid around the Imperium. The electromagnetic pulses disrupted the Council ship's systems, causing chaos and confusion among their ranks. The shields on the Imperium flickered and dropped to 60%. It wasn't enough to bring them down, but it was enough to give humanity a fighting chance. The battle turned into a blur of lasers and explosions. The Independence darted between enemy fire, its advanced maneuvering systems keeping it just ahead of the Council's retaliatory strikes. On the screens, flashes of light erupted as humanity's forces picked off the smaller Council ships, one by one. Every successful shot was a small victory, but Annabelle knew the real prize was the Imperium itself. "We've breached their outer defense perimeter," Commander Harper shouted, his voice full of disbelief. "The command center is within reach. Push forward," Annabelle commanded, her heart pounding in her chest. "We're almost there. Keep the pressure on." The final push was underway, but the Imperium's command center was a fortress. The closer they got, the more intense the resistance became. Every corner of space around the flagship was filled with the remnants of the Council's warships, each one trying to protect the heart of the Empire. Their desperation was evident. This wasn't just a battle. It was a war for survival. Annabelle's eyes flickered over the sensors. "There, the weak spot. Target it with everything we have." The Independence fired its primary weapons, the massive energy cannons on the side of the ship lighting up the void of space. The powerful beams streaked across the darkness and hit the Imperium with devastating force. The explosion was massive, shaking the entire battlefield. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The Imperium staggered as if reeling from the blow, and then the command center's shields collapsed. Humanity's fleet had breached the heart of the Council's power. "We've done it," Lieutenant Jameson shouted, a triumphant grin breaking through his usually stoic expression. But Annabelle remained focused. "Not yet. We still need to finish this. Get to their command center. Now." As the Independence surged forward, the Imperium's massive defenses were falling apart. Smaller Council ships scattered, trying to regroup and protect their flagship, but it was too late. Humanity had already broken through, and the Independence was heading straight for the heart of the enemy. Annabelle's thoughts were racing. If they could take down the Imperium's command center, they would cripple the Council's ability to coordinate. Their entire fleet would descend into chaos, and they could win this fight once and for all. But the risks were immense. The closer they got, the more concentrated the fire from the enemy became. The Council was desperate, and desperate forces were the most dangerous. The Independence shot through the remaining defense perimeter, firing on all cylinders. The hull shuddered under the impact of enemy fire, but they pressed on. The battle was reaching its crescendo. The fate of humanity and the galaxy was hanging by a thread. One final strike, one final push, and the Council's reign could end. As Annabelle locked eyes with her officers, she gave one last order. "Let's finish this. Full power to the engines. Prepare for the final assault." Humanity's fleet, battered but unbowed, made its final assault on the Imperium. The galaxy would soon know if this was the end of the Council's empire or the beginning of humanity's ultimate triumph.